thank you again for joining us. I'm Behi Rabani. I'm the host of Story Problem. This is a show where real math and real science can be found inside real stories. Today we're going to talk about a very important idea, proportional reasoning. And my hope is that by the end of this episode, we'll come away understanding three things: ratios, equivalent ratios, and unit rate. Last time we found the math beating inside your heart. Today we're going to find the math that decides whether a medicine heals you or it can be lethal. To be able to better understand these concepts, I want to start with a story. Our story begins sometime near the end of the 1700s in England. A woman cannot breathe. She is drowning, and not in water. Her ankles have swollen until the skin becomes tense and shiny. Her belly is tight and full, and when she lies down, she can't even get her breath. So she sleeps sitting up, if she sleeps at all. The doctors of her day had a name for it, dropsy, and almost nothing to offer her. They can name this condition, but they really have no tools to help it or treat it. And what they cannot see is where the fluid is actually coming from. It's coming from her heart, a weak, failing heart, letting fluid back up into her body like water behind a failing dam. And the thing that will save her, if anything does, is a flower. A tall, elegant flower with speckled purple bells growing wild in the hedgerows outside her window. The same flower that, in a slightly larger amount, could stop her heart entirely. The very same plant is both cure and poison, and the only difference between them is a number. That number is what today is really about. So let's talk about the right dose. Our doctor is a man named William Withering, Birmingham physician, botanist, and one of those restless Enlightenment minds who couldn't look at anything without wanting to tinker with it, take it apart, and really understand it. At this time in the late 1700s, intellectual life was alive with the idea that the universe followed rules that could be studied and discovered. The same mathematics used to understand the motion of the moon could also explain forces, machines, and new steam engines that were transforming everyday life. Mozart at this time was writing Figaro in Vienna, and balloon mania was gripping London. Aeronauts attempting to cross the English Channel in balloons were the mega rock stars of the day. And the story goes that Withering heard about an old woman out in the country of Shropshire, a folk healer. She had a family recipe passed down for treating exactly the kind of swelling that left doctors shrugging. People who'd been given up on were somehow getting better. Now, most physicians at the time would have ignored a country remedy. Withering did the opposite. He got hold of the recipe and found it was a jumble of some 20 different herbs. But Withering knew his plants. He looked at the list of 20 and reasoned, most of these do nothing. They're padding, filler, just tradition passed along. Only one of them could be doing the real work, and only one of them was powerful enough to be dangerous: the foxglove, digitalis. He'd found the active ingredient, which sounds like the end of the story, but is actually where the really hard part begins. Because knowing that foxglove works is almost useless without knowing how much. And how much is not a botany question, it's a math question. It's a question this whole episode is about. Here's what made foxglove so terrifying to use. Give too little and nothing happens. The heart stays weak, the flood keeps rising, and the patient does not survive. Now with the added unease that the cure was sitting right there just out of reach. Give too much and the foxglove turns on you. It is, after all, a poison. The heart, instead of steadying, lurches into a dangerous rhythm. And today we know these rhythms as something called complete heart block and bidirectional ventricular tachycardia. Life-threatening heart rhythms, both. There are significant GI side effects as well. And strangest of all, the world takes on this yellow-green tint, as if someone had drawn a colored film across the patient's eyes. There's even a lingering theory that Vincent van Gogh, well known for his blazing yellows, may have been under the plant's influence, though that one we'll leave as a maybe. So the safe amount and the deadly amount sit very close together, closer than for almost any medicine that you can name. The space between not enough and too much was very narrow, and a physician had to land within that window, exactly in a patient who was already dying. And it gets worse because the plant itself was different when you picked it. A leaf picked in spring isn't as strong as a leaf picked in autumn. A leaf grown in one soil isn't as strong as one grown in another. So a spoonful of foxglove was a meaningless instruction. One spoonful might carry twice the punch of the next. Withering was trying to find the right dose of medicine that was never quite the same strength twice. To have any hope, he needed to make the strength predictable. He needed to fix the relationship between the amount of leaf and the amount of medicine inside it. He needed a ratio. Let's step out of the world of withering for a second, because I promise you already understand the tool withering needed. You use it in your kitchen. Say you're making lemonade for your kids. 1 cup lemon juice, 1 cup sugar, 4 cups water. Now their friends show up and you need a whole jug. To keep it tasting right, you have to scale up all the ingredients. More lemon juice, more sugar, and water all together, keeping them in step. 2 cups lemon juice, 2 cups sugar, 8 cups water, etc. A bigger jug, but the same drink. That relationship, 1 to 2 or 1 to 4, is a ratio. And here's the key. A ratio is the relationship that changes in step with a change in size. The numbers can grow. 1 to 4 can become 3 to 12, can become 10 to 40. But the relationship, the taste, stays exactly the same. That's what makes a ratio different from the percentages we talked about last episode. A percentage was a snapshot, a part of the whole, just kind of frozen. A ratio is a relationship you can stretch. When 2 ratios describe the same relationship, like 1 to 4 and 3 to 12, we call that a proportion. A proportion simply tells us that both amounts have been scaled by the same factor, so the relationship between them has stayed the same. It's how you double a recipe. It's how a map makes a country small enough to fit on a page. Every real-world distance is reduced by the same scale, so the places stay correct, the correct distance apart from one another. And it's how a doctor scales a dose. So every episode, I want to leave you with an idea you can understand and know how to use, not memorize a formula. Here's this one. When you're staring at a ratio, find the 1 first, the amount per 1. That is the unit rate. Here's what I mean. Suppose a hot chocolate recipe says 6 spoons of cocoa makes 3 mugs, and you want to make a lot, let's say 5 mugs. Don't panic. Don't reach for algebra or an equation. Just find the 1 first. 6 spoons, 3 mugs. How much for 1 mug? Divide 2 spoons per mug. That's it. That's the hard part done. Now, 1 mug is 2 spoons. So 5 mugs is 2 times 5, 10 spoons. Once you know the per 1, every other amount is a single step away. And here's a small piece of vocabulary offered only because you may run into it. That per 1 number, 2 spoons per mug, has a formal name in school textbooks. They call it the constant of proportionality. It's the fixed number that connects the mugs to cocoa. However many mugs you want, multiply by 2 to find the number of spoons. So if the phrase constant of proportionality shows up in a 6th or 7th grade worksheet, don't let the name make it sound harder than it is. It simply means the amount for 1. In this case, 2 spoons for 1 mug. We already found it when we calculated the unit rate. Ratios come up in everyday conversation all the time. One easy way to recognize them is to listen for the word per. Miles per hour, dollars per pound, milligrams per kilogram. The little word per is Latin, and it means roughly for each one. So whenever you hear per, someone has already done the hard part for you. They've found the one. They've handed you a unit rate. 60 miles per hour just means in 1 hour, 60 miles. Scale it to any number of hours you like. So this week, listen for the word per. When you hear it, you're usually hearing one amount compared with another. And that means you're dealing with a ratio. Now let's discuss how Withering solved this problem with exactly this idea. He could not control the weather, the soil, or the natural strength of every foxglove plant, but he could make the preparation more consistent. He gathered the leaves at the same stage of growth, dried them in the same way, ground them into a powder, and weighed that powder instead of a vague spoonful. That brought him to the kind of relationship we've been talking about in math, a dependable amount of medicine for each dose. Instead of some foxglove, he could say in effect, this much powder per dose. That per dose amount acted like a constant of proportionality. It was the fixed number connecting the amount of powder to the dose being given. Once that number was established, Withering could scale the treatment carefully. One measured dose, then another, while watching the patient's response. It was not perfectly predictable because foxglove was still a plant and each patient responded differently, but Withering had replaced the spoonful with a measured unit. He had created a relationship he could observe, compare, and adjust. Doctors have a word for that careful creeping up. We call it titration of medications and doses. But you can just call it what it is. It's proportional reasoning. Amazingly, Withering did this for 10 years. He kept records like a scientist, not a folk healer. 163 patients, their cases written down honestly with failures alongside the cures. And in 1785, he published all of it in a book with a very 18th century title, An Account of the Foxglove and Some of Its Medical Uses. Here's the part I love. Withering did not discover foxglove. Country healers had known it for generations. The old woman in Shropshire knew it. What Withering discovered was the dose, the proportion, the relationship between the plant and the patient that turned poison into one of the most important heart medicines in history. This was a landmark in modern therapeutics and clinical pharmacology. He took a natural remedy and studied it systematically. He standardized the preparation, recognized its toxic effects, and adjusted treatment according to the patient's response. And here's why this isn't just a history lesson. That same foxglove, refined, purified, measured with instruments Withering could only have dreamed of, is still in medicine cabinets today. Its descendant is a drug called digoxin, drawn from a close cousin of Withering's flower. We still use it in certain cases for failing hearts and to control high heart rates in conditions such as atrial fibrillation. And we still handle it with enormous care, exactly for the reason Withering learned the hard way. The gap between the helpful dose and harmful one is famously dangerously narrow. It's one of the few drugs that we measure the level in a patient's body to make sure we've given enough, but not too much. 240 years later, the story hasn't changed. Same flower, same math. There's a line, older even than Withering himself, from a physician named Paracelsus. He said, in effect, the dose makes the poison, meaning there's no such thing as a substance that's simply safe or simply toxic. Everything is a poison at some amount. Nothing is a poison at a small enough one. Even water, even air. The same foxglove could help a patient in a small, carefully measured dose and harm that patient if too much was given. What mattered was not just the plant, but how much of it entered the patient's body and how that patient responded. And once you start seeing it, you can't stop. It's the coffee that's one scoop too strong, the paint that's mixed a shade off, that interest rate that decides what a loan really costs, the recipe that feeds 4 or 40 depending only on how faithfully you hold the relationship. Proportion is the grammar underneath almost everything we measure. Here's a thing I most want you to walk away with. You've been reasoning proportionally your whole life. Every time you've doubled a recipe, split a bill in 3 ways, maybe you compared 2 boxes at the store to see which gave you more for your money. You found the price for the same amount, or the price per unit, and chose the better deal. That was you using ratios and unit rates. Nobody had to hand you a formula to keep the lemonade tasting right. You already knew. So this week, listen for the word per. And when you see 2 amounts being compared, start by finding the amount for 1. That's what Withering was trying to do with foxglove. Replace a vague spoonful with a measured dose. And it's the same step you use with recipes, prices, speeds, and other ratios. You may already use this kind of math every day. Now you know what it's called and how to do it on purpose. Well, I'm Behi Rabbani. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Story Problem. If this made an old idea feel new, follow the show wherever you're listening and come find the episode notes and a few problems to try yourself at www.storyproblem.org. We'll see you then.